Welcome to Public Speaking with Peter George. Do you want to be calm, confident, and credible every time you speak in public? Then stay tuned as Peter and his guests discuss public speaking tips, techniques, and tactics that help you increase your impact, influence, and income. Here's your host, Peter George.
If speaking in public is the greatest fear, then speaking in front of a TV camera must be off the charts. I've seen many experienced speakers freeze when that little red light comes on. Heck, many years ago, it happened to me. It was my first time on TV, and I was a guest on a Miami morning show. I didn't necessarily freeze, but let's just say it wasn't my best public appearance. If you have this problem, that's okay. My guest, Stephen Brooks, is here to help bridge the gap between speaking on stage and speaking on TV. For over 35 years, Stephen has been immersed in all things retail. His career has taken him to 57 different countries, working with retailers, landlords, and retail-affiliated businesses, big and small. He's an author, speaker, and TV commentator for the TD Ameritrade Network. Here's my conversation with Stephen Brooks. Welcome to the show, Stephen.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
What was your first experience on being on stage and then on TV?
My first experience of being on stage, believe it or not, was a childhood one. Back in what we call in the United Kingdom junior school. I often put myself forward to always be in school plays or class plays, and was fortunate enough on more than one occasion to land a starring role. So my first experience of actually being on stage and enjoying that interaction with the audience and feeling that connection with the audience was very, very early. It wasn't until my late 30s that I actually did any television. And that was a very, very different experience. Because there are so many things that can go wrong with television in terms of technology and lighting and that whole stress of lots of lights and looking into a camera and not feeling the energy off of an audience. So those were my two experiences. Speaking on stage professionally, I've been doing for a long time. Right back in my 20s, I was on stage in some form or another, whether I was talking to groups of retailers or whether I was talking to chambers of commerce. And again, for me, it's that connection, that, sucking in the energy of the people around you and interacting. That's the thing I love most.
Do you prefer one of them over the other, stage over TV or vice versa?
Always stage, because I think there's an element of danger in being on stage, particularly when you want to do Q&A or particularly when you can see if the audience is responding to you or not. And I'm very conscious of that. It's the guy that's 2 rows from the back who just hasn't looked up, for the last 10 minutes. I'm now directing all my energy at you because I want you to get this. So stage always. Of course, in the last year with doing virtual speaking and conferences and obviously television, I still prefer and can't wait to be back on stage again, with a live audience for sure.
There's nothing like that instant interaction that you can feel and see that you just can't otherwise.
No, that's right. The other thing about being live on stage, of course, is that invariably you're following somebody. Okay, particularly if you're doing conferences, somebody's coming off, you're coming on, and there's always that variable of how did the last guy or girl leave the audience for you. And I'm really conscious of that when I go off, because I want everybody to kind of be pumped up and have enjoyed that, so that they're really looking forward to the next person that's coming on, because in a very selfish way, the person that was just on was really entertaining. So we want something equally as interesting. And on more than one occasion, and I'm sure maybe people would say the same about me, I've followed people on where I know that for the first 10 minutes, I've really got to work hard just to get that audience to where I want them to be. in terms of, sat up, listening, engaged and interested. And I've had, I've walked off and obviously had people say, kind of, thanks for doing that. That's going to make my life a lot easier. But equally, as I say, I've followed people on that have kind of left people in a bit of a Debbie Downer mood. And so, but that's part of the excitement as well. That kind of, that challenge. I love it.
Is there a difference in preparing for TV as opposed to being on stage? And if so, what's the difference in the preparation?
For me, being on stage is much more a physical preparation. Some obviously, voice exercises for me. I often just maybe disappear down a corridor somewhere just to either jump up and down and get some adrenaline going, or just to have a chat with myself about what I'm doing. Of course, there's the whole preparation of knowing your stuff as well. And any good speaker, whether they're doing television or whether they're on stage, whether they're doing something virtual, you really do need to prepare hard and rehearse. And there's a lot of rehearsal, certainly for me, that goes into anything that I do like that. Of course, there is always that variable of going off script because somebody asks a completely interesting question or something happens and you want to take it in a different direction. But with television, I think there's a lot more time to prepare in that way. There's a lot more, kind of visual aids you can have around. When I do TD Ameritrade, what people don't see is I've got, a number of Post-it notes around my screen about the points I want to hit, because it's live that day and there is data from the stock exchange coming out or reports from retailers coming out. So it's changing, literally up to about 10, 15 minutes before we go live. So I want to make sure I hit those points, but preparation is everything in anything you do, whether it's getting ready for a football game or whether you're going to speak on stage. You need to take time. You need to find time to prepare as well. And I made that mistake very, very early on in my stage speaking career, where I would just leave it to the day before and I think this will be okay. And of course it wasn't. And that's how you learn your craft. You learn how to give yourself enough time to prepare. Again, just look at what the variables might be on the day if you're doing television, and then go out and execute in the best way that you possibly can.
What do you say to those people? And I'm sure you've heard this. Well, I don't want to rehearse because I will look like I rehearsed.
The answer to that is the answer that everybody gives, is I guess, which is nobody knows what you're going to say anyway. So there isn't yes, you might come across as I know my stuff. And again, I'm not a fan of reading PowerPoints or keynotes off of a screen. I just think that anybody can do that, and you're not a speaker, in my opinion. You're just somebody that can read. So I don't think that's a challenge. I think that if somebody's sitting listening to you and knows that you've prepared, then for me, that's a sign of, that's being respectful for your audience. People don't know that you rehearsed. They don't know that you were up till, 2:00 in the morning, just changing it because there was something in there that just didn't work. Maybe there's a line in something that just doesn't work for you and you need to change it. And then of course you have to go and relearn it all. So I think it's kind of it's a question that cancels itself out. People don't know what you're going to say when you go up there, unless of course you're saying the same thing time and time again and people are following you around. You do get conference junkies, don't you, just turning up and they always want to listen to whoever, which again is another point, I think, about you've got to keep it fresh. And even though your message might be the same and your topic is the same, that I'm always conscious of, well, yeah, but I've heard that. I want to hear something fresh. Or, yes, it's the same message, but what's the cutting edge thing right now? And I think that's a big thing around what you see with some people, is that you can see them once or twice. And yes, it's exciting. Yes, it's engaging. But then when you see them for the third or fourth time and it's exactly the same, then I personally, I don't believe that's adding value. And I think it probably lets the speaker down in terms of you're not working hard enough to deliver something people will really, really enjoy. And I appreciate, that people might be hearing it for the first time, but for me, that just gets boring in my head.
It really does. I have to change it up, if not for them, which I want to. I have to change it up for me.
As you say, if only for yourself, because that just, in my book, that just makes you more engaging, gives you more energy, and you do come off better feeling that you added some value.
You mentioned before about the responses you get from a live audience as opposed to a virtual audience. How can someone overcome that or become more comfortable with a virtual audience?
It's about just engaging with people in the right way. I've done some virtual conferences recently where on Zoom, you can turn the camera off, and I don't like that. And the same on webinars. And so I think, you want to get everybody in the audience to get those cameras turned on, so you can just as you can look out on an audience, that you can see what's going on. Body language, facial expressions, so important when you're speaking. I think that you try and engage as best you can, but then if you're trying to overcome that, I can't get the energy going in there, then just dive in with your audience quicker and start getting them to spark back at you. And I did something for Rotary Club International a couple of months ago, and we were fortunate enough to have a large amount of people on there. And we were I was doing a guerrilla marketing workshop with them, which is always a fun one for me to do. I love doing that. I could just sense, because you've got that silence, that some people were kind of just, I love the idea, but how does that apply to me? And so, we just switched it up and said, listen, I'm just going to come out and just start asking you questions, because this is a lot of new content for you guys that maybe you wouldn't do. Rotary International is a very kind of reserved organization. But the minute we got people talking, then it kind of changed the whole atmosphere and the whole dynamic of it being a virtual conference. Now, I'm sure everybody's seen, these big screens that Tony Robbins has got going on, and thousands of people in a huge auditorium. People like me don't have the luxury of that. If I'm lucky, I've got 2 screens either side of me with as many boxes as I can fit in them. But again, it's just engaging with people as quickly as you can. And again, being prepared for that in a virtual situation. I still take as much time about making sure my room is set in the same way that I would, making sure I was early to being on stage and understanding what the stage was like and where people were sitting and who was going to be the furthest away. Because your room, your stage, your screen, your environment is a huge part of what you're doing. And if you don't feel comfortable in that, then that's going to change how you perform.
Now let's switch over from virtual to TV. If someone's in a studio, how can people cope with that little red light coming on for the very first time?
In a studio experience, you've got a lot going on around you, as you'll remember. You've got cameramen, you've got people with scripts, and then you've got somebody talking in your ear, telling you you're about to come up. I agree. The first time I did something like that, there was that moment of panic. Where am I looking at? What am I looking into? And who am I speaking to? For me, I think it's what I do in most situations like that. I take a huge deep breath and just try and center myself and relax. And I know my stuff. And the minute that red light comes on, for me, that's, instead of it being, red for danger, for me, it's like red for excitement.
I like that.
And so that's how I cope with it. Big, deep breath, center myself, have confidence and self-belief, which you have to have if you're doing any kind of public speaking. Everybody should know that. And then my kind of mentality is that isn't red for danger. That's just red for excitement. That's and off you go.
I'm going to have to remember that. I like that. I got a call a couple of weeks ago from a business associate. She called me and said, I'm going to be appearing on television, one of the morning shows locally. Could you give me some tips? And I told her, one of the things you'll do is sit down with the producer or email back and forth with the producer or the person interviewing you, going over the questions and the like. And she contacted me and said, just like you said it would happen, they contacted me. We went over the questions, all set to go. That morning at about 10 o'clock, the morning that she was going to be on, she calls me and said, they didn't ask one question that we prepared.
I come back to being prepared for that, because that's happened to me more times than A, I care to remember, and B, when I've actually been asked the questions that I sent through. And so, and it always comes out of left field because you're not expecting it. The other dynamic for that is that when you're on with somebody else who's in your industry, and they kind of make a comment about something that's going on, and then the follow-up question comes to you, and it's a bit like being, a rabbit being caught in headlights, if you know that expression. And so again, for me, that's about preparation, but also it's about not tuning out to what that other person is saying, because you're so fixed on what you think they're going to ask you, and so you're queuing up in your head your answer that you've worked on and rehearsed in your head, and so on. And again, that's a very different thing with television as well. When you're on stage and maybe you're doing a panel, again, that's equally as that, maybe they've given you a list of questions that they think they're going to ask you, but obviously, things go left at the lights, and somebody goes off on a tangent, and it's a bit more interesting maybe than the full subject matter, and so everybody dives into that. And I've been caught out in that because there's a tenuous link to my niche, and so now I can't contribute, and it is a bit like, I guess, being any kind of team game, that you try and then desperately to get back in the game, because because you're on stage, you don't want people just to think you sat there as window dressing, but equally that you want to be able to contribute. So you're right, it happens more times than maybe people are aware of.
Listen, take a deep breath, answer it the best you can.
Absolutely.
What's one last piece of advice you can share with our listeners?
Enjoy it. I'm just a huge believer in, if you're not enjoying anything that you're doing, why are you doing it? So go out there and enjoy it. People, like we said earlier, people don't know what you're going to say. People are there because they're interested in what you're going to talk to them about, or what you're going to present to them, or what you're going to discuss on the panel. So enjoy it. Just enjoy it. And if you find yourself going off script, if you find yourself, just sparking with people in the audience because that's giving and adding more value, for me, that's the best thing ever. So my advice is that enjoy it.
Stephen, where can our listeners learn more about you and the services you provide?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Stephen A. Brooks. If you Google the pop-up retail expert, I'm the number one hit on Google, or you can go to thepopupexpert.com. You can even find me on Instagram at the Retail Specialist. We're doing some stuff on Clubhouse. If anybody's looking at Clubhouse, that's another great medium. That's a whole different dynamic, as everybody knows. They're the main places you can find me.
Thanks so much for being here, Stephen. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Peter. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
That's a wrap of another episode of Public Speaking with Peter George. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Tune in Monday when you'll hear another episode of Public Speaking with Peter George, and again Thursday for your next episode of Quick Bites, public speaking tips and techniques you can digest in 5 minutes or less. Until next time, remember, when it comes to speaking in public, you've got this.